la Fondation Dassault Systèmes supports projects contributing to a better future, using virtual worlds to improve the real world in education, research, and cultural heritage. We want to nurture intelligence and creative thinking, and Claudio Capelli will give us an outstanding example in healthcare.
Thank you very much, Fanny. Thank you. Thank you all for coming here. Thank you for inviting me here. It's really an honor and a pleasure being part of this fantastic installation. And what I want to show you here today is basically how some of these concepts that you have seen beautifully shown in the pavilion, such as design by nature, optimization, visualization, can be actually applied to maybe ultimately applied to improving healthcare, and in particular in the cardiovascular field. So today what I want to talk about is a project called 3D Care, which is a research project hosted at University College London, where I come from at the moment. And it's funded by la Fondation Dassault Systèmes, which allowed us to develop a research concept to bring some of the visualization tool to improve cardiac healthcare. And in particular, the story I want to tell you today, I thought that it starts better with a practical example of our job and our research. And this story starts with a referral letter, with this, which is a simple email that I received some time ago, in which I was asked by one of our clinician, a clinical colleague, to basically create a 3D model of a patient's heart in order to help him in making an assessment and a decision on a complex case. In particular, he wanted to know whether a particular device and which particular device, which particular size could be implanted to solve that problem. And in this short email with only 5 or 6 lines, but there are all the concepts I want to speak about today. First of all, there is the clinician who asked me a direct question and asked me, who act as the biomedical engineering. And in particular, he asked me to apply biomedical engineering tools such as 3D modeling, simulation, visualization to solve a particular clinical question related to a cardiovascular problem. That I will explain to you later. And everything to solve a problem related to a patient. So to find the optimal solution, the best solution to solve the particular problem of that specific patient. So this is basically a step towards precision medicine, personalized medicine. To tell you to continue telling you the story, I need to do a step back and tell you where I come from. First of all, I graduated a few kilometers away from here at Politecnico di Milan, and today I'm happy to see in the audience also one of my former professors. And then I moved 12, 13 years ago to the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children. Great Ormond Street Hospital is a very special place. It's a pediatric hospital in London. It's the largest and most important pediatric hospital in the UK, one of the most important in Europe and in the world. And it's only pediatrics, so every specialty you can imagine are all applied in the pediatric field. There are over 60 specialties there. There are every year almost 50,000 patients who are in the hospital, 220,000 patients seen every year. And it's a hospital which invests a lot in research because of the severity and of the condition, and also because these conditions are sometimes particularly rare, so a lot of research needs to be still performed. In these settings, I'm part of a multidisciplinary group which does research on in the cardiovascular field. Our group has the peculiarity of being extremely multidisciplinary. There are clinicians, there are engineers like me, there are computer scientists, there are informatics. And we all bring our knowledge, our discipline, to try to solve a cardiovascular problem. Talking about cardiovascular problem, this is a picture of a classic picture of the heart, like you find in many anatomical books. And even from this sort of a simple, which is not a drawing, but you can appreciate the complexity of the art. And this is indeed a complex system that you obviously know it's vital for our life. However, the reality is even much more complex than this fantastic drawing that is in the anatomical books. And here I reported some pictures that I borrowed from one of my colleagues at UCL, who is a world expert in cardiac morphology. And you can appreciate really the complexity of the structures. Here you see a sample of a pediatric heart, and you can see front and back. You can see the coronary arteries in it, but you can also see how the architecture really is extremely fascinating and complex. Here you can see, for instance, on the left-hand side, the valve leaflets of one of the 4 heart valves, and then here, even more complex, really the beauty and the complex architecture of one of our chambers of the ventricle. The situation becomes even more complex, if you like, in a pathological situation. These are, at our hospitals, we have pediatric patients who come, or who are born actually with congenital conditions, so basically a defect of the heart. And in these slides, I reported only a few of the examples, which tends to simply report which kind of problem can be. You can have maybe simple problems, such as small hole in one of the walls of the heart, but you can have even a much more complex situation in which the heart is arranged in a completely different way. With vessels which are in inverted position, which comes from the wrong or the abnormal chamber, and so on and so forth. And these congenital conditions are actually not so rare. I mean, it's a very complex family of defects. There are around 60 different defects. And it's almost one newborn every 100 is affected by some sort of condition. And what makes this condition unique is that they are extremely complex, and within the population of maybe the same defect, there is a huge variability between individual and individual. So all these factors really are supporting us in the idea of creating a personalized care and a personalized intervention, and that's where we come in place. Now, this is possible, a sort of personalized treatment is now more and more possible because of advances in 3 main areas. First of all, there has been a huge advances in medical imaging. We have access to much better and higher resolution medical images, standardly acquired. The second factor is that we have a much more powerful computer to post-process these images and to do then simulations that I will explain to you in a second. And then the third advances, which is a part of the 3D Care project that I'm going to present today, we as a community have advanced enormously in the visualization capability. So this is what I showed you before, in the previous slide, is the overall workflow of our research. So we take the images of patients, we transform them into a 3D model, and then we do something with that, and I will show you what. So in terms of medical images, we work mainly with standard medical images such as MRI, computed tomography, ultrasound. Every time that a 3D data set, let's say, is acquired, we can do a 3D model out of it. And this is, to be honest, state of the art. Now it's not particularly complex creating a 3D art model out of the 2D black and white pictures. And why do we do this? Because this can improve the understanding of those images, which are anyway still quite complex to interpret. So a 3D model can help facilitating the communication of a particular problems, and also making you understand the spatial relationship of the structures, which are complexly arranged. And on top of that, with our project, we developed a completely in-house a virtual reality application, which allows you not only to visualize the complexity of the geometry of every single patient's heart, but to interact with it. And you know how the virtual reality is not only a visualization experience, but it is an immersive experience which allows you to interact with it, to handle it, to handle virtually the object, in this case, again, the heart of a patient that we have reconstructed, to read, for instance, notes out of it, to see the dynamics, if you have the information to transform also this kind of information into the virtual reality model, because you know that the heart is not static, and then to explore it in depth in order to basically getting a visualization of very complex structures which would not be possible simply without performing the open heart surgery. So here you can see, for instance, how you can split the model, understanding how the coronary arteries are going through the heart, and also with these virtual tools to explore the inside-outside of the patient. On top of that, we are developing tools which allow the surgeon to perform the surgery before going into theater, so sort of virtual surgery. All these in order to improve the planning, to give more confidence to the clinicians before they go into theater. This has been developed in a hospital, for the clinicians. And the clinicians are one of the stakeholders interested in this technology, but not the only one. In this picture, you can see, for instance, a surgeon trying the application on a patient just before going into theater. And now, cardiac surgeons are really tough characters, especially in pediatric. They are really expert, obviously, in what they do, and they are extremely focused in their work. They also are very used to technology. And that's why I think their input in the design phase is absolutely crucial to be involved in. And despite all this, they were quite impressed. I mean, we have really the opportunity to work with the world-leading surgeons in our hospital, and even if this is sound, for instance, like the last feedback, I can't express how nice this tool is. In all the English language, is actually a huge compliment from a surgical from a surgeon. The second stakeholders for what we developed this application, and this is, I would say, equally important, is for education. I mentioned before the anatomical textbook, I mentioned before the schemes of how to understand congenital heart disease, but the reality, I also mentioned how complex and different the reality is. With this tool, we can really implement data from the reality into a tools which is easily accessible from students, from medical students. And these are pictures from taken from this week edition of the morphology course, which is run of our university, in which the professor is teaching also, started teaching the morphology also with these tools. And even in this case, again, I report some of the feedbacks we received from our students, which are started getting really interested and impressed by all this. And last but not least, the last stakeholder involved in the development of this technology are patients. Patients, their families, and the general public. In this case, we really took advantage of the popularity of the technology, such as virtual reality now. We did the same years before with 3D printing, which are technology which are getting closer and closer to the general public, and these allow us to use the technology to deliver a message about specific conditions such as heart disease. So families have the chance, in this case, to getting familiar not only to the general condition, which again can be really complex to understand, especially if faced with medical images, but thanks to this tool they can also get familiar to the condition of their own patient. And the patient himself, maybe if they are old enough, we tested already with a few teenagers, they can have access to the 3D model of their own heart. And the reaction is, even in this case, has been quite surprising. Finally, all these can also be integrated, and that's the future, that's the next step of what we want to do, integrating some of the computational tools, such as finite element analysis, computational fluid dynamics, in order to personalize more and more the treatment by simulating the treatment, the implantation of a device, and trying to understand, thanks to these simulations, which is the optimal treatment for any specific patient. This one leads me to the conclusion, which is the story that I started before. And this is, in a way, the ideal conclusion. This is the second letter I wanted to show, which is the discharge letter, in which the clinician wrote to another colleague in the medical notes that he had some help from the engineers in making more smooth his decision-making process, in understanding which device and which size of the device was ideal for that specific patient. And he put some very technical engineering terms, such as finite element analysis, even in a clinical note, which obviously is a great sign for us in order to proceed with this. Finally, this project, again, funded by la Fondation Dassault Systèmes, it started getting quite big recognition, and last year we won the Franco-British Business Awards, and you can see this funny picture, in a way, of the ceremony in London. With this one, I thank you again, Fanny, for inviting me here, and you all for the attention. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudio. Do we already have questions from the audience? So while you maybe get ready, yes, thank you very much. Microphone.
I wonder how much time does it take from the first email and build all these amazing things and do the operation, because
yeah,
I have no idea.
That's a good question. First of all, you have to keep taking into consideration that these are not emergency patients. The operation can be scheduled. Having said that, after the images are done, we have a few hours to do the reconstructions. Now the process is more and more automatic. And then, to be honest, to go into the VR system, it's a matter of minutes. So I think we can respond to that email in half a day, considering what we are, the general routine. The idea, however, would be to reduce even 2 minutes, to make all this process automatic. So we are working on developing algorithms which we as a community to make this process more and more automatic, so that it can be done even without us as a field.
Thank you. Another question just now?
Thank you for what you show us. So I understand the utility of this kind of tools for teaching and educational purpose. My question is related if you think that this kind of tools will go directly into clinics and will be used to take a clinical decision in the future.
That's another good question. I think it's already happening, but I think we need to regulate the process, because now it's very interesting how the clinicians reach the decision. And this has certainly somehow scientific facts, but it's also based on feelings and experience, of course. So I think that already showing these tools to clinicians make them make their mind. So the problem is that so it's already happening in a way. The problem is that how we regulate this process, and I think we have to prove on, as a community, again, not on a single case, not on a few cases, but on hundreds of cases, to convince and also ourselves first and the community afterwards, to convince that these tools makes a difference, actually. So we have to test in really medical terms whether these improve the treatment.
So I suppose it helps as a researcher to be embedded in the hospital. How is this new, and how is it accepted internally, for instance?
Yeah. So this is absolutely crucial to whatever you saw it today. It's developed because we are there.
Yes.
And the story of our group started already in the 90s, again, with the first professor who went to Milan and establishing collaboration with Great Ormond Street Hospital. And I think at that time it was really, really unique. And this made a difference in finding, in identifying first the problems, and then in shorten dramatically the time and the distance between the problem and the solution. Because if we are there, we can catch immediately what is the question, the clinical question, and then trying, obviously, to solve it. So this is absolutely unique in defining all what we have done, and because what we have done is designed to really tailor the need of the clinician. And now it's not unique anymore, fortunately, I think. I'm in contact, we are part of a network of more and more hospitals who understood that the research has to be open to the multidisciplinarity in really their daily activities, because again, the best ideas come really drinking a coffee with the medical doctors, who are particularly busy, have a crazy job schedule. So you really need to be there when the question comes. And then we have the time as a researcher to develop finding solutions and so on and so forth. But it's happening. It's happening, and there are examples in Italy, there are examples in Germany, in the US. More and more groups like ours are flourishing.
That's good, because I think one of the challenges in innovation is to break down the walls and to work in multidisciplinary teams. As you show, you get out of the lab, you go in the field, and it helps, I suppose, adoption from the different stakeholders, and that's what speeds up innovation, this mutual respect and this understanding of each other's motivations and indeed, capabilities.
This understanding is, again, essential, crucial, vital, because we really need to start understanding each other, building the common language and translating thoughts and ideas into, again, this common language to find solutions. And being there, it helps dramatically this process.
Yeah. And I guess the other dimension of your work is breaking down the wall between the institution, indirectly, maybe, but there's the medical institution, maybe a family in crisis, lots of fear, and being able to use these technologies not for highly specialist use, but also appealing to people's emotions and psychology.
That's why I mentioned the involvement of patients and public in developing this one, because I think, again, we have technology. I mentioned 3D printing, and I forgot, for instance, to show, I can circulate here now, just an example of a 3D printed heart, so that you can have a look at the complexity of it. But again, 3D printing, virtual reality, our tools are almost toys that we can really use to break down that barrier, cultural and also of knowledge, because it's a very complex thing to understand, especially if you are in a stressful situation. And this can be something to, on one side, distract in order to release the stress, but on the other side, having a different approach to basically getting more familiar with the condition. And
so how old are the kids being operated on?
From newborn to teenagers.
Okay.
So it's really...
And this size mock-up, what type?
That is a 6-month-old patient born with a condition which is called double outer right ventricle. And in that case, you can see that the heart is open with the two cuts, one in front and one in the back, to allow the surgeon to understand the intracardiac, so the internal architecture of the heart on which he will be operated. That's why you see it open.
Any other question from the audience, maybe, after this little warm-up? No? So I guess I would add one thing from my part. It's the ability maybe of VR to appeal to the different parts of our brain. You were talking about managing fear, but also allowing understanding. And I think we... throughout the week, I've tried to rethink ourselves as animals, being part of the environment, and we must be able, what we are also trying to do, I think, is to be able to stop thinking of ourselves only as rational beings, which is far from true, but appealing to our the logic of humans and the way we work, and those technologies will have a fantastic appeal for skilled clinicians, families, and students who maybe are being educated in a different way thanks to those technologies. What's your view on education for the future clinicians?
Yeah. And I mean, that's a key point, and that's one of the main key points of all this project. It's providing a new tool and exactly to educate the new generation of medical students, because we need somehow to meet their expectation that, I mean, they are simply like us. We have the native digital who are coming up, obviously, and they are used, obviously, to interact with all these tools. And now we have so much potential that we cannot be limited only, obviously, to the traditional way. And the problem also for medical students, for example, is really having access to real data, because you spend years and years getting specialized, but these models can, again, trying to shorten this bit with the sort of highly realistic or as highly realistic representation of the complexity of the situation. So yeah, I think the potential there is actually huge.
Yeah, you were talking about real life hearts that have to be manipulated by generations and generations of students. And so now it allows a different interaction.
Yeah, in fact, again, one of the reasons why it was developed, where it was developed at our center, is because we have a huge library of anatomical samples, which are extremely difficult to manage, extremely difficult to conserve. And the problem here is exactly to creating a digital library, which allow then students for future generations to have access to the same level or of information for the next generation. So one part of the continuation of this project will be digitalizing this rich and huge library of heart samples.
Yes, and so I guess that circles back to la Fondation Dassault Systèmes with this idea of working with the next generations in research.
Yeah, also
and
because
education.
this has obviously the potentials to reach really globally the medical students, because we are also thinking of developing apps which can work on the mobile, and so it's I think the potential is there huge.
Let's say, what's next for you? Because besides scaling up.
Yeah, actually, this one, scaling it up, is the priority. Completing this library, starting distributing the library, going out of the hospital where we are and getting a reaction from the outside world. And also working on the simulations bit that I was mentioning, because also that one has a huge potential.
And always furthering this path of personalized care.
Yeah, exactly, because that is always the final goal. I mean, personalized care, precision medicine are all the concepts which are now achievable, because we have all the tools, basically, and we, again, as a multidisciplinary group community, we just need to put them together. We need to put them together, but all the data are finally available.
Thank you. I think this is a lovely conclusion to a session that has been focused on making sure that that technologies are used for a better future. And thank you so much, Claudio Capelli, for your intervention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.